So I am extraordinarily excited to be here. One, because of the fact that I think talking about this topic is very near and dear to my heart. It is the reason that I went into medicine. I went into medicine because of the fact that we do a horrible job in healthcare every single day talking to our patients. We do a lot of talking. We do a very poor job in terms of listening and equipping our patients with what types of tools they need in order to best inform us on how we can best partner to identify the solutions that are specific to their problems. Instead, we identify people by the diagnosis they come into and put them in a bucket that is based on quote unquote evidence-based medicine and fail to recognize that there are no two people who have the same diagnosis, who live the same life, who have the same medical or psychiatric comorbidities, who have the same social situation, who have the same academic background, who have the same social support. But yet, our instructions, our advice fails to meet those needs. We see every single day that healthcare fails millions because of a failure in communication. This is your life, your journey, your destination. And you're going to hear me utilize similar terms throughout this to illustrate how you can put yourself back in the driver's seat and identify the destination that you want to achieve. Today is the day that I challenge every single person in this room to begin your best life. And some of you may even say, I'm already living my best life. And to that, I applaud you. However, I guarantee by the end of this discussion, you'll identify additional ways that maybe you haven't thought of previously. Because I very, very frequently hear, and I've even heard it today, I'm narcoleptic. I'm sorry to inform you, but no one in this room is narcoleptic. You are a person with narcolepsy. You lead with being a person first, and the diagnosis second. The reason why is because I have now imposed a glass ceiling on what your success can look like. That is unfair. It is unfair to the child, the adolescent, the adult, that we tell you what you're capable of by labeling you or starting off with the diagnosis first. When you're looking at overall, what are all the components that contribute to wellness? It is not just a diagnosis. It is not just medications. It's not just testing. And in fact, you'll notice that there's not even a physician illustrated in this. These are all the components that need to be considered. What is the mental and creativity? What is that cognitive component? The intellectual capacity. What does the social network look like? What are the financial limitations or opportunities that are important for the individual? Academic, occupational, barriers, obstacles, opportunities. Considering someone's spiritual and even religious dispositions, environmental factors as well as physical. You just heard Dr. Granier give a great talk about what you can do to optimize your mental health. Even beyond thinking about mental health, one of the tools that I would like people to leave here with is starting to consider an intelligence that is even more important than intellectual quotient. It is your emotional intelligence. This includes self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, social management. Being self-aware is the best tool that you can have. I don't know where the slide went. The best tool you can have to inform your healthcare partner as to what is the needs that you have. And when you look at this, there are two ways you can live. You can either live with everything in the world imposing what I'm able to do, live by labeling yourself as a narcoleptic, and so therefore I am unable to achieve and succeed. Instead, I challenge you to pivot that mindset and exercise your circle of influence to be able to minimize those external factors that potentially are limiting you from being able to live your best life. This is an example of some illustrations that you can say that this is who you are, this is what you're surrounded with, and these are all the areas that may potentially impact how you may feel. Social media is a great example where it can either be the best thing ever, and I can say it's been great for me because I've met many people in this room through social media, and it's been so informative to me, and I've been able to make great friendships. However, my younger version of me would probably not say that, because I would look at social media and say, I don't look as pretty or as thin or as blah, 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 and minimize who I was and what my security is. For people who live with chronic conditions, they very frequently may look at others who are putting their best versions of themselves out and making that reinforced mindset that I'm unable to achieve those things. So you'll commonly hear me talk about the journey, your journey. We are all on our own individual healthcare journey. And the reason I specifically choose the term journey is because it is an ever-changing process that we are all engaged in. When you look at just life over time, even if you were to remove a medical diagnosis, there are so many things that evolve. In early life, it's about school, making friends, extracurricular activities. As we get older, we're going through these weird, awkward social changes because puberty's happening, my voice is changing, I'm having things changing in my body, I'm breaking out with pimples. We start dating, we're driving, we're transitioning to college. There's work, there's marriage, there's family, and then there's other changes that happen to our bodies. If I were to insert a chronic medical condition at any stage in that life, it's going to look differently depending on the age. And it's going to impact me differently over that time. That's not even considering if I'm diagnosed or not. The child who develops the symptoms at 5 or 6 or 7 years of age, but doesn't get diagnosed until adulthood, looks very different than a child who maybe developed the symptoms at 17 years of age. They've missed out on so many formative years of what is social development, appropriate social development going to look like. What is the skills and the academic acquisition? So these are important to start framing out what the expectations are. Because when I am seeing patients, I have to be able to keep in mind, this is where we are today. And what is tomorrow going to look like? What is a year from now going to look like? Many times when we lack that framework, we can mistake a change in our life as a failure of the treatment we're on, where it may not necessarily be the treatment not doing what it was, but more so that we now have different expectations based on societal expectations. If you think about the child or adolescent who developed narcolepsy, where their main responsibility was academic success, they can prioritize all their energies to being successful there. They then graduate high school and they transition to college. They're living on their own. It no longer is just about academic success. It now is I have to be able to take care of myself. I have to find food, cook food, clean clothes. The delta, the difference between people without narcolepsy and people with narcolepsy begins to grow because the guardrails have been taken away. However, even if I were diagnosed, it may come across as I'm becoming a lesser version of who I want to be. This empowers you to recognize where you can influence the changes that may be necessary. This may be an illustration that many of you can identify with. There was a period where you had no symptoms. Then there was a symptom onset. You maybe even realized there was a problem. Struggling and seeking care, dismissed, missed, and misdiagnoses. You're delayed and determined. You finally find your healthcare partner. You get your diagnosis, prognosis, social support. You make strides, and hopefully you get to the point where you're living the life worth living. Some of you may be in various stages of this part of the journey, which isn't even considering the last slide that I just showed. The amount of time we spend in each of those parts of the journey also dictate how vulnerable we feel to the disease we're experiencing. Being diagnosed with a chronic condition comes with a lot of different emotions. Sometimes it's denial, anger, frustration. We go in and out of acceptance of it. And it's not taking into consideration all these other pieces. Now, one of the things I would encourage you is making sure you're using the right GPS on this journey. A global positioning system? No. Your GPS is going to be your HCP. What is an HCP? Some will say it's a healthcare professional. Others will say it's a healthcare provider. I would say it's none of those. Those are the wrong terms that we should be using. Should be a healthcare partner. I use the term partner because as a healthcare partner, I tell my patients all the time, my education and expertise is in medical diagnoses, medications, tests. Your expertise is in your own life. If I have fooled you at any moment to think that in this 30 to 60 minutes that we've spent together, that I'm more expert than you in who you are, I'm sorry, because that is not true. And so it has to be a partnership in order for us to have personalized care. You hear healthcare systems right now using this as a wave of hands. We want value-based outcomes. We want personalized care. But we remove the person every single day who's in that journey, and we impose on them what our preconceived notions of what healthcare delivery should look like. So you do want to consider these characteristics when choosing a healthcare partner. You do not need the expert, although we all would love Emmanuel to be our treating provider. You don't necessarily need to be the expert. You need to listen. Consider what the person who is in front of you is saying. Someone who's asking you questions, wanting to know more specifically about you, not telling you what you likely are experiencing or what you should want, but hearing from you what it is that is your goal. Responding empathetically, encouraging you, not discouraging you, not scolding you for missing your dosing, or wanting to adjust a medication. Don't you know these are controlled substances? And of course, support. I would say to you that your GPS is actually your guiding partner specialist. And so it's important to remember, what does GPSs even do? I don't know about you, but my GPS has never identified the destination that I need to go to or I want to go to. It has always been me telling my GPS, this is the location, give me my options and routes. Sometimes I want to get there the quickest, sometimes I want the scenic route. Sometimes I just don't want any detours. So how do you enter your destination? Well, sometimes you can have it like A, but I would say that probably the majority of people who experience symptoms of narcolepsy have a course that looks a little bit more like B. However, once you're diagnosed, I would encourage for you to get into the driver's seat. That's my goal for my patients, both literally and figuratively. So where do you want to go? How to select a destination? As I mentioned, you are the expert in your own life. So consider using a symptom diary. You've heard me correctly, not a sleep diary, a symptom diary. Just as Dr. Gradner had said earlier, The sleep physicians were very disappointed that mental health outcomes had very little to do with sleep, but more so about wakefulness. So the reality is that we have been a failure in healthcare by separating the two. In sleep medicine, we talk everything about the night and fail to talk about the day. And in all the rest of medicine, we talk about how well you're doing during the day and forget everything about the night. At some point, we have to remember the full 24 hours are connected. And so a symptom diary is to be able to take into account everything you're experiencing. We have even been a failure of those of us who've invested time in educating on conditions like narcolepsy by only educating on pentad symptoms. Individuals who have narcolepsy have so much more than just the pentad symptoms of narcolepsy. And the reality is that without you being able to understand what you're experiencing, how am I ever going to be able to make recommendations or have a discussion with you on how to improve them? How am I going to be able to say that this isn't my area of expertise? This is where we need to partner with the cardiologist or the pulmonologist or the endocrinologist or whoever else. This allows for you and your healthcare partner to identify trends and patterns. It provides you personal insights on what you can influence or control, remembering that the circle of influence is a part of that self-awareness, a part of that self-management. It is a part of you not living vulnerable to your disease, but exercising the power you have over the diseases that you may be experiencing. It can also help establish a diagnosis. Sometimes there's something else other than narcolepsy that you may be experiencing. It can also help to establish a baseline. What's another failure we have in medicine? Here's this medication, it'll help you with your wakefulness, and we judge it based on your Epworth Sleepiness Scale. I don't know, by a raise of hands, how many of you went to a sleep physician because your Epworth was a 17? That was the main reason. You said, hey, my Epworth was 17. I would like to be a 5. Can you do that for me? I don't think so. It was based on whatever disability you were experiencing secondary to excessive daytime sleepiness, whether it was a motor vehicle accident or you were falling asleep in school or you weren't able to do the social activities that you would normally do. What would be an illustration of that baseline? When I'm taking care of a kiddo who's telling me, you know, I don't ever see friends, ever? Well, you know, in school, but I don't ever do anything with them after school. 0 days a week, nothing after school, nothing on, no. Then my goal is for us to get you hanging out with some friends. The next visit, I want to know how many times a week have you hung out with friends? These are the types of baselines that become really important because I can give you any medication under the sun and tell you it's going to improve your excessive daytime sleepiness. But if we don't have a palpable way of seeing that advancement, we tend to fail in recognizing when we are actually doing better. On the flip side, when things are much better, we sometimes forget how bad things were, and helps us to level set. Because the best thing that I get to experience is when patients have a growing expectation of what life can look like. But sometimes they mistake it as things aren't going well right now. And giving that framework of, you're actually thriving so much more than where you were. Let's first celebrate the fact that you're doing so much better and that your goal is only getting bigger. And again, finally, helping to reduce feelings of vulnerability. This is such an important dynamic. There are 2 things that I very commonly hear from patients who have central disorders of hypersomnolence. 1, time is a critical element of my day. I just don't have enough of it. I think that's just a US thing, but I think people with narcolepsy have a much, much bigger challenge with that. The second is the lack of predictability of my every single day. This gives you the opportunity to start having predictability because you're able to now know your own personal specific trends and patterns. And that now allows you and your healthcare partner to create a strategy so that you're not vulnerable to the disorder, but you're able to exercise influence over it. When you're taking a symptom diary, it's important to know that there are different characteristics that can be helpful. So you want to record symptoms, you want to track their severity. Maybe it's not the same thing every single day. What are the modifying factors? What brings it on? What makes it worse? What makes it better? Is there any impact from the medications? What are some of your daily habits? A very common thing that I hear is compensatory mechanisms that people develop to avoid experiencing symptoms. The number of times, what's your likelihood of falling asleep watching TV? Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. Oh, okay. Because I stand up. I walk on a treadmill, right? Recognizing some of these types of things can be really helpful. Your emotional and cognitive state. How is the symptoms of narcolepsy bleeding into other areas that are important? And then making sure you're partnering and communicating with your healthcare partner and developing a progress map. Being able to have measures of success only beget more success. Some ways you can do this is either having it all on one thing. I find that this might be a little bit too crowded for someone to be able to record everything. However, this might be your high yield, like, okay, I can put some symptoms, when they're coming on, what the severity and associated disability, some modifying factors, medication timing, dose and effects, and sleep. However, you can also do this the same as you would do a normal agenda on a day-by-day basis, giving a description of what symptoms was I experiencing? What was the onset and offset of these symptoms? What was the severity and associated disability, modifying factors, medication, timing, dose and effects? In terms of sleep, it's a full 24-hour because you have sleep intruding into your day and wakefulness intruding during your night. What would this look like in real life? Symptoms I might be experiencing: excessive daytime sleepiness, headache, doing things and not remembering them, also known as automatic behavior. Cataplexy, I feel dizzy and faint, increased heart rate, brain fog, restless, broken sleep, sleep paralysis. Sometimes if I'm a patient, I go and talk to my sleep doctor and I give them all those descriptions. What's going to happen? I just want to hear about the sleepiness that you're, and the restless sleep maybe, and the sleep paralysis. Those other things now get packaged into somewhere else. This is someone else's problem. But the reason it's important for you to have this illustration, and as you can see, the details associated with it, is because that now may introduce the opportunity to go, you know, I'm concerned you're on this alerting agent. Perhaps that might be contributing to your feeling dizzy or faint. Perhaps that might be contributing to your headache. Although I'm your sleep doctor, these are things that I may need to be able to manipulate in order to help you to be able to have a more predictable day-to-day experience. This is also really powerful because when you have this in your hands and you have gone the efforts of really trying to understand what you're experiencing for yourself, it makes it a lot harder for the physician or the advanced practitioner you're seeing to dismiss what you're concerned about, because you are presenting to them more than, you know, it's been hard lately because I felt more sleepy than usual. I've missed more things than usual. You're giving them concrete data. You have to remember, we like science, we like data, we like to be able to respond to data. You're giving them something that they can't ignore and dismiss, and they can respond to, and you can monitor, and you can see, and they may even help to identify the words that you're both saying to one another. Some of the biggest failures we have is that the words that the physician may say is not matching what the patient is saying. We know that narcolepsy impacts every aspect of life. And when we look at individuals who have narcolepsy type 1 and 2, it's not uncommon that they're going to say that it greatly impacts my daily life. It is important for you individually to then be able to dissect, what does that mean? I don't have a daily life pill. And so there has to be a combination of what is medication related that I can improve, what is psychologically related, what is social support related. These are all very important for us to actually construct a holistic strategy that addresses all the areas that you're suffering through. When we look at this, we are identifying that it is much more than us just saying we're sleepy, or we have cataplexy, or disturbed nocturnal sleep. Again, going beyond the pentad. For me, these are factors that are so important. As humans, we're social creatures. When I look at data like this and I find that individuals are describing, I can't spend time with friends, I don't really have friends, and my social life is really challenging. You compound that with other literature that states that individuals with narcolepsy, they have a harder time finding life partners because of that lack of social opportunity. We don't necessarily ask those questions. And again, being able to advocate for yourself, to be able to identify that these are areas that are problematic to you. Very frequently, we measure success based on what social constructs have said is success. Are you academically successful? Do you have a job? Do you make money? Having other people in your life to support you and be able to actually spend time with them is important. When we look at some of the work from Karen Maskey and a group at Harvard, specifically talking about adolescents and interviewing both the adolescents and their parents. When my narcolepsy was at its worst, I'd say, and I couldn't function very well. I didn't really have my best friend anymore. And like, I wasn't as close to people, and I kind of lost all of my confidence. The Epworth Sleepiness Scale doesn't measure that. This is from a parent. I've heard him say things like, I don't have any friends or only have one friend. And I think he wishes he could have more friends and that people like him more and be more likable. He doesn't believe that he's likable, but I also know that he just believes that he's completely different. He has narcolepsy. People look at him differently. He feels pretty strongly about that. As a physician, without knowing those kinds of words, there's no way for me to address nor be able to give guidance of who may be able to support. Giving direction to either whether it's a psychologist or an organization like Wake Up Narcolepsy, where being able to align and identify with other individuals going through that same journey is extraordinarily powerful and empowering. And it's, again, these are the pieces that as a physician, we walk out of the room and go, I did such a good job prescribing that medication. Their Epworth went down 3 points. But we fail to recognize that these are things that people are still suffering with. And there's multiple illustrations here about its impact on mood and on their family dynamics, how it can spill into development of things like anxiety and depression. When I hear that this is a condition that is characterized by two symptoms of I don't have enough time in the day and I have a lack of predictability, of course I'm going to be anxious. Of course I'm going to feel depressed. Of course I'm going to be socially isolated. And we suck as doctors asking these questions. When you look at this and he says, has your doctor asked about your social life? 70% of the time, no. We're too preoccupied by validated scales because evidence-based medicine tells me that that's what patients are measured by. But the reality is that might be great for an academic study when I live in the ivory tower. But for the person who lives on Mulberry Lane, it's not necessarily measuring what they're experiencing. Has the doctor asked about your sex life? 90% said no. However, when you ask individuals with narcolepsy how their sex life is, one answer I hear commonly is non-existent. The second is, I'm afraid of having intimacy because I'm embarrassed to either fall asleep during it, have cataplexy during it, or God, I'm so tired, I can't even think about it. It is not by surprise then that there is going to be reduced likelihood for individuals who have narcolepsy to potentially have less likelihood of marriage and children. Again, when you define yourself as a narcoleptic, you automatically are signing yourself up as that's going to be my existence. What I'm challenging you today to recognize is that that is not a truth. The truth is that all of those things are possible. It's a matter of us being able to recognize that we do a horrible job asking you these questions. And in order for you to be able to be treated so that you can have the life that you want to live, you have to demand that from the provider that you're seeing. Di Wakeman is one of my favorite authors. She writes a lot of books around leadership. And so one of her books is reality-based leadership. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting when I read this book was that she would talk about, and this is kind of similar to what Dr. Grabner was talking about, of how we can kind of put our own emotion into situations, interpret it, but we're losing the facts. We're kind of responding to feelings. And so she describes a situation where an employee comes to her and is like, I can't believe that so-and-so did X, Y, Z, da, 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 da. And she goes, well, what did you do to help in that situation? She's like, well, I don't know. And she's like, well, let me ask you a question. What does great look like? And so the first time I read that, I went, wow, that is ridiculous. What leader would ever say that to someone? And I find that I say this all the time to my team now. What does great look like? The reality is because it challenges you to identify what is a more optimal way of being than what the current situation is. And it then automatically flips you into planning and strategizing rather than dwelling and victimizing. I want you to think about that. What does your great look like? That is your goal. When considering a drug's effectiveness, this was a study that was done, what would great look like? It would stop me from sleeping during the day, increase my energy, improve my memory, lead to a more productive life. It would allow me to sleep through the night. It would improve my overall well-being, stop cataplexy, decrease depression, lose weight, stop night paralysis, stop night hallucinations. Again, I want you to think through, are these conversations that are being had with you when you're going to see your healthcare partner? If not, these are going to be things that I would encourage you to start incorporating. When thinking about your developing your progress map, from your symptom diary, what are your identified symptoms? What is disrupted for you? One of my favorite questions to ask my patients, because it really helps me to frame and understand them, is, what can't you do because of the symptoms of narcolepsy? This allows me to understand what their challenges are. That now becomes the goal to be able to get to. What is the pattern of disruption? What other wellness concerns are present? You've heard from a variety of different presentations that having other medical or psychiatric comorbidity is not uncommon. And then what does the great look like? What are my routes available? Again, utilizing your GPS. What is the expected time to this destination? Giving some anticipatory guidance. This isn't an overnight switch. We're going to be seeing the improvement over the course of 6 weeks. This is when I want us to be able to see in 1 week, 2 week, et cetera. What are possible detours that may occur? What are the side effects? What are things that I should be anticipating? How should I respond to those? When should I reroute? When is this not the right solution for me? When should I press that OnStar button? What's the SOS? Your call to action today. Exercise your circle of influence today and every single day. Don't fear change. Expect change and be prepared. Characterize your current state using a symptom diary. Define what great looks like for you now. And it's okay if that changes with time. And in fact, celebrate if it changes with time. That means you're making progress. And partner with your HCP to create your personalized progress map. And finally, don't accept less. Thank you. Any questions?
Have started presenting them with symptom diaries, and how has that changed their patients?
Sure. So I can reflect on patients without narcolepsy, because in my group, I tend to see most of the patients who have hypersomnolence disorders. However, I encourage the same type of mindset for my patients who have things like epilepsy. What has been very powerful is seeing how this has now created different paradigm switches where we now are more likely to refer to neuropsychology to understand what are the learning disabilities that may be present, or what kind of 504 accommodations or IEPs can be implemented. Seeing that my epileptologists are actually referring to sleep medicine more regularly because they now have asked the questions or have heard from the patient, oh, wow, you're having sleep problems as well. Okay. And so it tends to create a more well-informed picture that allows for people to be more responsive to. Some physicians will say, I feel overwhelmed by this is just too much information for me, right? But the reality is that on that first intake, it might be, especially if you're scheduled for 25 minutes and there's 50 minutes worth of information. But that's the beauty of the fact that when you're using a symptom diary, that information stays there, as opposed to, I remember to tell you these things this time, and I forgot to keep record of them for the next time. So there's this variability of progress, which then invites whoever you're partnering with to ignore it or forget it. Because if it's not important to you, then it's not important for me to address. So it is, I think, something that is variable. And in a healthcare setting where I have lots of residents and fellows and medical students, I have found that that has had a very high adoption, which is favorable because that means the future of medicine looks a lot brighter. Any other questions? Yes.
Dr. Morse, just someone online here. They're wondering, can you recommend some good symptom diaries? I'm guessing they mean examples.
Sure.
Any apps, something to print out online, etc.
Sure. So I actually have put those, the ones that I've shown on here, I've put them on my website, and you can, just so that people could print them out. So you can go to Damn Good Sleep. DAM stands for Dr. Anne-Marie Morse. That's right. I put the DAM at Damn Good Sleep. But this way people can print those out, because I actually haven't seen any anywhere, and I've always advocate for people to do it. And so previously it was just telling, get like a little marble notebook or something. But you can go on there and print those out. Any other questions? Thank you.